the Dialed In Angling podcast presented by Onyx Fish, Arneson's Rocky Point Resort, Runnings, Visit Watertown, South Dakota, Mantrap Lake Lodge, and Visit Cook County. Like a light switch, we went from Labor Day to fall. It's hard to believe that temps are the way they are. You're seeing leaves already starting to change. We had frost advisories in northern Minnesota, big northwest winds. Fall is here. The last few years, it seems like fall has taken a little while to get here. Remember last year, surface temperatures in late October were surface temperatures that you would see in mid to late September. I mean, we were about a month behind. We had beautiful weather. Not to say that we're not having beautiful weather right now, but I love fall, and the quicker we can get to cooler surface temperatures, the quicker we can get to some really great fall fishing. And, I know for a lot of people, people think of fall as a calendar mark, right? Kids go back to school right after Labor Day. Fall starts now. And I get a lot of calls from people saying, hey, we want to come up early September and do a little fall fishing. Well, fishing can be really good this time of year for a lot of different species. If you've tuned into the last few podcasts, I've talked about how panfish are starting to set up in the fall. I've talked about chasing down large walleyes this time of year, whether they're suspended or off weed edges. Yes, it can be very, very good fishing this time of year, but we're not quite into fall patterns. I don't really consider fall patterns to typically start, at least for walleyes and smallmouth and that sort of thing, until about mid-September. I'd say about the 15th of September is sort of that threshold. And then it starts getting really good really quickly. And a lot of that has to do with surface temperatures, how quickly surface temperatures fall. So with the drop in surface temperatures that we've had rapidly over the next few days, I've got a super busy guiding schedule coming up here all through September and October. I'm going to be curious to see how the fish react to this rapid decline in surface temperature because, generally speaking, in the fall, when you have cold fronts, a lot of people think of cold fronts as this really negative thing in their mind. Fall cold fronts can be very good for fishing. Smallmouth bass, it almost always triggers them. Walleyes, it triggers them. Panfish, we've talked in the last few weeks about vegetation starting to die off. As soon as that starts to die off and oxygen levels change, those fish will quickly get into their fall patterns. And when I talk about fall patterns, a lot of times it just has to do with the way fish are loading up into areas. And so with these cool temps, bring it on, man. I love everything fall when it comes to fishing and hunting. I'm not a big pumpkin spice latte guy or cider or anything, but I have been already seeing people drinking that stuff. I've seen people with sweatshirts. Leaves are starting to turn. Like I said, frost advisories in northern Minnesota. Things are happening quickly. I'm super pumped about it. So on this week's podcast, we're going to talk a lot about different fall things that are starting to occur, including this week, I'm heading over to the Aitkin Fisheries, the MNDNR Fisheries building, I guess you would call it. We're going to meet with Mr. Berg. Greg Berg is the Mille Lacs Area Fisheries supervisor. Greg's been on the show several different times talking things of Mille Lacs, but we're not just talking about Mille Lacs with Greg. We want to talk a little bit about what they're doing and what the DNR is doing in the fall to sort of collect data on big lakes like Mille Lacs, Leech, Winnie, Lake of the Woods, kind of how they go about doing their fall assessments. I know they do some electrofishing. That starts typically this time of year. Greg's out on the water the next few days, electrofishing, and I know he's going to have some insight into what he's seeing out there. Super cool and intriguing to me. As a guy who's really fishy, I think a lot about fish movements and patterns. It's cool to see what the DNR collects for data and sort of just compared notes. I talk a lot at the Mille Lacs Fisheries meetings with the DNR about what I'm seeing as an angler. I like to hear the input as to what they're seeing from the DNR's perspective, not just on Mille Lacs, but small lakes as well. In addition to electrofishing, they do other gill net assessments on small lakes. They do it, based on a cycle of years. It's not every year. They have tier systems for their lakes. They have tier 1, tier 2. So based on that is kind of how they go about doing their data collection on all these lakes. And it's interesting to me to find out what Greg has to say about the process, to sort of peel back the curtain a little bit to see, how the DNR looks at things, or how they sort of timeline things in the fall as we move forward. Because I know a lot of the data collection that they get from our various lakes across Minnesota, a lot of it comes from fall assessments, and a lot of it comes from electrofishing and all these things that, Greg is going to talk about. So I'm super excited to talk to him about that and be over there in Aitkin kind of while they're doing it. I'm really appreciative of Greg jumping on the podcast, because I know how busy the DNR is this fall, but it's always intriguing to me. I want to get out and jump on some of the boats with these guys too. I've been offered, when they do their fall assessments, to jump on. I've been offered, same with electrofishing. I just have never had the opportunity. I'm super busy guiding, and it's hard to go out at night and then perform the next day and be able to guide and fish all the next day. And do that. But I really want to sit down with Greg, at least on the podcast, and listen to what the DNR has to say about the data collection. In addition to that, before we go to break here, I just want to touch on and give a salute out to one of my mentors that passed away this past week. His name was Randy Havel. If those of you that know the name, he was once an owner of StrikeMaster Augers, him and Ray Peterson. Randy was a friend, a mentor, someone who I looked up to. If I look back in my career, when I first started kind of in the early 2000s, full-time guiding, my summer business was built up really strong, but the winter business, I was just sort of getting there. I had a few customers. You have to think back during that time period in the early to mid thousands, ice fishing was really taking off as a sport. Yes, it was popular here in Minnesota, but that was kind of it. It was sort of the sitting on buckets. You had, a few products out there as far as flip overs, maybe some pop-ups. There wasn't a ton of products like there is today. Obviously, we didn't have wheelhouses and all of the popularity of all that. So having a StrikeMaster gas auger, was sort of the way that I developed into the angler that I am today. StrikeMaster Augers sponsored Mr. Walleye Specialties, who was owned by my Uncle Gary. That was his fishing team. I was also on the fishing team. My dad was on the fishing team. But I remember getting my first StrikeMaster auger when I was 10 to 12 years old. Prior to that, I had a hand auger, and I used to sit out in front of my parents' place. And really, my only experience as ice fishing was sitting out in front of my parents' house, drilling a few holes and ice fishing on my own. I did do a few trips with my dad, but it wasn't until we got that gas auger where we really took off. I remember I tell the story all the time about getting up to Lake Winnebagosh and seeing guys go 5 deep with gas augers and drill holes as far as you could see and dropping your baits down and catching perch like crazy. That was where I first sort of learned ice trolling, where if you drilled a lot of holes, you'd catch a lot more fish. That sort of was ingrained in me, but having that StrikeMaster auger. Now, fast forward to when I started my career in the fishing industry. Again, summer was really busy, but my winter business wasn't even a shadow of what it is today. I was just getting going because back then you had a lot of resorts that rented out houses, but there wasn't a lot of guides out there ice guiding. There was only a handful that I could think of across Minnesota that would be considered ice guides. Obviously the Perch Patrol was established out in Devil's Lake. I remember talking to Jason Mitchell and people like that at the ice show. But there was that was sort of it. There wasn't a lot of people doing it. I know on Mille Lacs there was very few people going out ice guiding. And so, I met Randy Havel. Obviously, I knew him from when I was younger, but had a working relationship, kind of told him my game plan that, hey, I'm going to start guiding full time, summer and winter. Sort of started talking to him about drilling tons of holes and running and gunning and ice trolling. And Randy gave me my first auger. He gave me my first sponsorship in the industry. I worked my first show at the St. Paul Ice Show of any show. It was open water and ice. That was the first show I ever worked, was the St. Paul Ice Show. And getting my foot in the door with Randy, getting the work the booth, I also was able to talk to other sponsors there. So then that spring, I ended up working at the Northwest Sports Show. And so it really kind of opened doors for me. And Randy welcomed me in with open arms and said, come on into my office. We built a friendship. I started working on, different auger technologies with him. I know when bait pucks first came out, I saw some of the first prototypes of bait pucks. He showed it to me, said, "Hey, what do you think, kid?" And I said, "Man, I think you got $1 million idea right there. That is brilliant." Just little things that sort of throughout the years that, he either showed me or we did together that made me the person that I am today, as far as the businessman and angler that I am today. I've had a lot of help along the way. My dad has been very instrumental, but Randy has been or was a mentor that entire time as well, working on auger technology, like the solo motors, for example. When Tecumseh went away, I know Ray and Randy were looking at different options of motors. They sent me up to Mille Lacs with a whole bunch of different motors. I was drilling holes and guiding and using them. I literally grabbed my cell phone, called them, and I said, "I found our motor." And we worked very closely together for a lot of years through StrikeMaster. Obviously, StrikeMaster got sold to Rapala, and so that connection there was made because of Randy Havel. I knew the guys at Rapala. I kind of worked with them on the soft side of things, but with them jumping into the ice market, that sort of changed the trajectory of what I was doing. There was a lot behind the scenes that Randy helped me out with, as far as getting me hooked up with different individuals in throughout the business. And I was always appreciative of not only his advice, but his friendship as well. I could call him up anytime and say, "Randy, what do you think of this?" And he was always good about giving me solid advice, from his perspective. He gave me some advice that sometimes I didn't want to hear. And then other times he gave me great advice that I thought, you know what? He's been doing this a long time. He's been around the industry for a long time. I'm going to take that advice. Randy, in addition to owning StrikeMaster, he owned a rep group. For years, he repped all sorts of different outdoor products. He was an outdoorsman, loved to bird hunt, loved to fish. He repped a lot of different products, including on the gun side of things. So I just always enjoyed our conversation. If you ever ran into Randy Havel, he always had a smile on his face. He was always happy to see you. He was always the first one to come over and shake your hand, and he always made time for everyone, including the last few years. Him and I haven't been as close as we were when we worked together when he owned the StrikeMaster brand, but he still made time. A few times I called him when I was headed to the cities. He made time, met me for lunch. We had some great conversations catching up. So Randy Havel, you will be missed, my friend. Thank you for everything that you did for my career. And hopefully we'll see you sometime soon. So you will be missed. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to sit down with Greg Berg, Mille Lacs area supervisor, talk about what the DNR is doing across the state as far as different fall assessments, electrofishing, things that have started in this fall process. I can't wait to talk to Greg. Greg is a super guy to talk to. I always enjoy talking to him when we're at fisheries meetings. But Greg has not only worked the Mille Lacs area for a long time, he's been a fisheries biologist for a long time. So I can't wait to kind of peel back the curtain and hear from them, hear from the DNR to see what they have in store for collecting data on all our lakes across Minnesota. So stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling podcast coming your way. OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download onX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water.
Visit Cook County, Minnesota, a year-round fishing destination like no other. Spring brings steelhead and smelt runs along the Lake Superior shoreline. In summer, cast for walleye, lake trout, and northern pike in the region's inland lakes and rivers. As the leaves change, so does the fishing, with fall offering some of the best lake trout action around. When winter settles in, grab your gear and head out for ice fishing in a true northern wilderness setting. Whether you're an experienced angler or just discovering the joy of casting a line, Cook County has a spot and a season for you. Learn more and start planning your fishing trip at visitcookcounty.com.
Arneson's Rocky Point Resort in northern Minnesota offers a little something for everyone. Nestled on Lake of the Woods South Shore, it provides easy access to 14 remarkable reefs. Serious anglers know that Arneson's offers some of the best fishing, charter fishing, and small boat fishing options, all supported by the largest protected marina on the lake's South Shore. Accommodation selections range from 1 to 5 bedrooms. Equipped with all the modern conveniences, guests can enjoy a delightful dining experience and stunning lake views at the Rock Harbor Lodge, an on-site, full-service bar and restaurant. The two beaches provide hours of fun for the whole family. Whether you're seeking an idyllic fishing spot or a relaxing vacation, Arneson's Rocky Point has everything you need. Check them out at arnesonsresort.com. Okay, so I'm sitting in Aitkin at the Minnesota DNR's fishery office right here in Aitkin, sitting with Greg Berg. Greg Berg has been on our podcast several different times talking about Mille Lacs. He's the Mille Lacs area supervisor for the Minnesota DNR. But for this particular segment, we can talk a little bit about Mille Lacs, but more or less, I wanted to kind of peel back the curtains a little bit and just ask you a few questions on just being a fisheries biologist. And, fall is that time period where you guys are collecting a lot of data. You're finding out a lot of information, not just on Mille Lacs Lake, but a lot of other lakes and fisheries in Minnesota. So, Greg, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. It's great to be back. Appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, so you brought me in the back there. You got a really cool facility here in Aitkin. You do a lot of the fall assessments and the netting and the forage netting and electrofishing. And I saw the boat sitting out there. You actually brought me back. You guys were counting fish from your forage nets that you brought in. That was super cool. It was great to see all those young of the year perch. There were tulibies. We saw spot tail shiners. And bigger perch as well. It was really cool to see kind of all the forage that's back in Mille Lacs Lake. I know for years, for me, at least over the last decade, I've been so concerned about the forage base in Mille Lacs Lake. So it's really neat to kind of walk back there and just kind of see how you guys are doing things. Let's start with you personally. I look at you as a fisheries biologist. When I was a kid, I wanted to be in the outdoors world, right? Someone who was super passionate about fishing at an early age. I loved hunting. I loved being in the woods. I grew up in the Moose Lake area, walking up and down these lake river systems, coming home at, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, all skun up from bushes and just being out in the woods. I mean, that's what I liked doing. That's what I grew up doing. I had an earth science teacher at Moose Lake that was really good about showing us different things in the outdoors, wild edibles. I just gravitated towards that. So as I started looking at it as a career, I thought, man, I'd be a great fit as a fisheries biologist or working as a wildlife biologist or even a conservation officer. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Ultimately took the path that I did where, God at an early age had an opportunity to go up to Lake of the Woods and fish as a guide. I was fishing tournaments in high school. And so I went down that path instead of biology. how did you get your start, or did you know at an early age that this is what I wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tony. And I think, like you, a lot of us kind of grow up, when we're kids. I grew up in Baudette, right along the south shores of Lake of the Woods, right on the Baudette Bay, actually. So I had an opportunity, to go fishing all the time. I fished on the Baudette Bay, Rainy River, Lake of the Woods, all those things, were there at my doorstep, and I just love the outdoors, fishing and hunting. So that, just growing up there initially got me interested, in the fishing and the biology. Later on, I ended up, doing some guiding and working at the resorts up there and things like that. So it sounded like we had, kind of similar, backgrounds in terms of growing up and how we got interested in this kind of thing. At one point, I guess I just kind of got to know some other fisheries biologists and kind of pointed me in that direction, and so ended up, finding a program at Bemidji State. Going there, getting my degree, doing internships, and then, taking opportunities, as they came my way is, kind of how that went. But, for somebody out there who's, interested, in the field, I mean, there's a lot of, colleges that have fisheries programs. I mentioned BSU, but like Stevens Point, University of Minnesota, South Dakota State University are all pretty well-known programs, and we offer internships through the DNR, quite a few of them every summer for college students and things like that. So,
yeah, I bump into a few different students, that do creel surveys, for example. I see them at the landings that usually get to small talk, like, hey, where are you from? Where do you go to school? A lot of Bemidji students. I know this spring when I was up at Trapper's Landing and they were doing their Leech Lake, sort of telemetry study. I know there's BSU students' involvement there. I've heard of different invasive species studies that are done at BSU and at different colleges. So there's lots of internships for kids. Super exciting for me, having kids that are college age, or like my son who's getting ready to graduate high school. I know, that's something he might be interested in. And there's other kids out there because, you get to that point and like my son's a senior this year, and you get to that point where, what do you want to do in life? You start asking some of these students and they don't know, just like we did.
Mm-hmm.
You
Exactly.
don't know until you start to get exposure,
Mm-hmm.
and you start meeting with people like you,
Mm-hmm.
who can, kind of send kids down that path. And internships are great. Doing those internships in college can sort of set that trajectory. So it's really neat. I know for me, just being a fish head and being here in this office and being in the back where the guys were sort of counting the forage nets, gets me fired up about fish. It gets me fired up about fall. The theme of this entire segment has been, sort of fall things as they come. We got catapulted basically from Labor Day weekend and summer, the Minnesota State Fair, and then boom, it's September. I always tell people, everybody thinks when the kids go back to school and, the sort of September 1st hits or Labor Day hits, that's when fall starts. But for fishing, that's not always the case. I know in the fall, you guys are super busy. You've got a lot on your plate. Just being here, seeing everybody working in the back. I know you've got a ton that you're working on right now. Walk us through the timeline of sort of your job, what you're doing this time of year. I know a lot of what you guys do as far as data, the collection, whether it be forage data or gill nets or whatever, occurs in the fall. It's always been intriguing to me, not just Mille Lacs, but all the lakes, kind of your timeline, like how you start out and the things that you're starting to do in the fall, just like those forage nets that I saw back there today.
Yeah, the fall time is a great time of the year for us. I think we all get excited, to get out and spend a lot of time in the field. It's our main sampling event for the year, specifically for Mille Lacs, but that also holds true for many of the large lakes in Minnesota, Leech, Lake of the Woods, Winnebagosh, and many others. So, on Mille Lacs Lake, for instance, our sampling begins pretty much, around September 1st, and usually right after Labor Day, type of a thing. And we have a couple of different things we do. We first start out with our Young of the Year electrofishing survey. And that's done at night. We have 3 stations around the lake, and we do each station twice throughout the first couple weeks of September. And concurrently with that, we also do our forage net assessment on Mille Lacs Lake too, and we're doing that right now. Those were some of the nets we were just out looking at. And so after these first 2 weeks of September, then we'll actually get into our main gill net assessment on Mille Lacs Lake that takes place. There's certain water temperature regimes that we have to be at before we start setting nets, and once we do, we'll go for about 9 days through that. But our sampling pretty much takes up the entire month of September. It's a lot of fun for us because we get away from, the desk, and we get to go out on the lake and work up the fish in the shop and go through that routine every year. And it just kind of gets all the folks we work with, kind of excited.
I know you've done this a long time. A lot of the guys that I saw in the back, I've worked with at various levels throughout the DNR. Do you still get excited for fall? Like you gear up? I know there's a lot to do, and you have a lot of paperwork and data. And when we were back there, people were crunching numbers and measuring fish, and people were pulling fish. Do you still get fired up for the fall? I mean, is this the time of year where it's like your favorite, or kind of what's your mindset as you get? I know it's a lot of work, but do you still get excited about it?
Oh yeah, I love it. That gets all of us, I think, kind of back to our roots and kind of why we got into this line of work to begin with, because we like being outdoors, we like being on the boats, we like seeing the fish, working the fish, taking structures, all those things are, kind of what, piqued our initial interest in that. As time goes on and you advance in your career and stuff like that, sometimes you spend more time at your desk than you'd actually like to. So it's actually super, super fun to, get out on the lakes and see what's out there. So
is there anything that surprises you? Like, have you ever, just from being out there and setting nets and different things where you're shocked at certain things, or is there anything new where you've like, wow, I can't believe this happened, or something like a light bulb moment, if you will, or just something you learned, because it seems like every time I'm on the water, or anytime I'm even in the spring over the last few years on Mille Lacs, for example, when we've had those really late ice outs and it's super clear water because of zebra mussels, and I can just drive around with my boat and basically look in an aquarium, I've learned so much about that lake just doing that. Are there things when you're out there working where you're like, wow, I didn't know that, or just had sort of that light bulb moment?
Yeah, there's all kinds of unique and interesting things that we see being out there. The thing is, if you do this for 20, 25, 30 years, sometimes you kind of start taking those things for granted. But one of the probably coolest things is being out there at night, electrofishing and observing fish. They come in pretty shallow at night a lot of times, especially smaller fish. But, there's not many people out on the lakes at night, and it can just be a real, quiet, almost eerie sometimes place to be. And it's just so interesting to see, especially in clear water, because you can, like you mentioned, the aquarium, when the water's, on the clear side, our lights, shine down 5 or 6 feet pretty good. And you can just kind of see the fish doing their own thing down there. And, a lot of people would never know, that fish use those shallows that much, especially at night. So that's probably one of the things that's really pretty neat.
Yeah, I've learned so much as an angler just studying. I know my dad tells the story all the time, but when I was a little kid, I was probably 5 years old till I was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. I got a snorkel for Christmas, right? And I used to spend countless hours snorkeling through the weeds. You know, most kids are at swimming beaches, right? Not me. I was a nerdy fish kid, right? So I was swimming through the weeds, seeing how the fish related to that. I would go out at my parents' dock when it was super rough. We lived in Moose Lake on Moosehead Lake, and when we'd get a northeast wind, like off of Lake Superior, things would cool down. It'd be a big cold front, but we could catch walleyes off my parents' dock. So I always wondered, why did they set up along that shoreline when it's windy? So here's me as a little kid with flippers and a snorkel out there, kind of swimming at the end of my parents' dock looking for walleyes. And so that's how I think of you guys a lot when you're out there electrofishing in the fall. You know, I have those same sort of passions. I know my dad always tells the story. I'd be swimming in the bulrushes for bluegills, and I tied a little fishing line onto my finger, and I was catching bluegills in the water column as I was swimming. And my dad's like, who would do that, you know? But that was me as a kid, and I learned a lot by being in the water with fish. I still learn a ton just driving around, looking at fish, how they set up. That's why, you know, I gravitate towards like forward-facing sonar. It's just so cool to see those fish and how they relate to different areas of the lake at different times of the year based on different surface temperatures, different wind conditions. It's really neat. I'm sure in the fall, like this year, is radically different from last fall. You know, last fall, it seemed like it drug on until almost November. Boom, this year, right after Labor Day, like a light switch, it's been cold and windy and probably not as tranquil being out there at night as it typically is this time of year. How do you guys kind of set up for weather? I know that's a big factor when you're trying to pack all of this data in and getting all these things collected.
Yeah, it is. We're watching the weather constantly, Tony. You know, and wind is the biggest thing for electrofishing. In order, you know, to electrofish effectively, you know, it has to be calm. Otherwise, you just can't see, you know, down through the waves and things. So we're always trying to play the wind. We've got certain timelines that we need to get these things done by. So we're watching, you know, the wind and water temperature and things like that. You know, constantly, daily, just looking for the right, you know, times to get out there that we can sample effectively. You know, and the same with gill netting too, and forage netting. We have to get to those sites, so we kind of play the wind there, you know, so we don't have to beat ourselves up, you know, too much out in the boats. We have, you know, good gear that you know that can handle most anything it can throw at it, but we want to, you know, be as comfortable as we can out there too. And of course there's safety factor too. So yeah, but always looking at the weather, through our sampling period for sure.
Sure. You know, as I sit here in the fisheries office in Aitkin, you know, you guys are doing forage nets right now on Mille Lacs, but what are some of the other, you know, surveys you do? I know you've got gill netting here coming up on Mille Lacs, but also these small lakes. I always, you know, for example, Dialed In Angling is sponsored by Onyx Fish, and they put a lot of, you know, fisheries information. They pack it into that particular app, and they get it right from Minnesota's DNR. How do you guys decide, or when do you decide to do some of these fall assessments, not just on Mille Lacs, but some of these smaller lakes? I know on some of these smaller lakes, it doesn't occur every season. You know, is there like every year, do you get a sheet, a print off saying, okay, well, this year we're going to Lake X and Lake O and Lake P, and then next year we're going to survey, you know, Lake B, C, and D. How do you guys decide as fisheries to do your fall assessments, and at what time of year do you guys plan that as far as like surface temperature or from a calendar perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, like I mentioned before, you know, the large lakes, they pretty much get sampled every year because they're high priority for management in the state of Minnesota. And when you look at the other lakes, you know, so in Minnesota, I think there are 28 different fisheries management areas, and each lake in those management areas has a specific management plan. Okay, so we have to sit down and prioritize. You know, how often are we going to survey, you know, a particular lake? And That's basically determined, by the size of the lake and, does it have a public access? How much use is it getting? How many people are fishing in it? Those kind of things. So, some lakes are on, say, like a Cedar or Farm Island Lake, which I'm pretty familiar with. Those are on like 3-year schedules. Sometimes lakes are going to be on a 5 or a 10 or even a 20-year schedule. And there may even be lakes, really remote ones that you may just get into one time just to kind of see what's there. So you establish a file on your lake. Another thing we use when, that we might prioritize the lake a little more is if we're stocking a lake. Do we have a walleye stocking management regime that we need to monitor every few years just to see how the stocking's working? And things like that. So it's really about use and size, and stocking is kind of what determines our management schedule on a lake.
Yeah, my son always clings to, I tell this story a lot on this podcast, but my son clings to, a lot of data, whether it's stocking information, whether it's, your fall assessments, Onyx Fish does a good job of sort of classifying lakes if they're an outlier for a specific species or whatever. So when we're on road trips, my son and I have bonded quite often over just data and creel information. I'm sorry, fall assessment and collection. And so we joke a lot. We'll be driving by and my son will say, "Hey, have you ever tried this lake? It looks like it's an outlier for walleyes." And I say, "Well, when was the last time it was surveyed?" And he'd be like, "Oh, 1982 or, whatever." Or he could be like, "Hey, it was surveyed last year." And so that sort of lake goes on our radar based on our different fishing experiences we want to do. So it's super cool. One last thing before we wrap up here with Greg. I know you got to get back out there with the guys, so I appreciate you sitting down. You showed me some of the forage surveys. I suppose you don't have any early stats or anything like that. For me, as just an angler, I see a lot of perch, young of the year perch. I saw some Cisco's, some shiners, things we alluded to at the beginning of this segment. But how are things looking, or is it just too early to tell?
Well, it's a little early to tell. I mean, the jury's out, but we're still seeing a lot of forage in Mille Lacs Lake. For instance, in our forage nets, we're getting just a ton of age 1 tullibees, a lot of age 1 perch. In our electrofishing, like I said, we're still kind of in the middle of it right now, but we've seen a lot of those 2024 year class walleyes in Mille Lacs from last year, so they look pretty abundant. So lots of those fish showing up. There appears to be some young of the year yellow perch, like we just seen that 10-foot forage net out in the shop. There was a decent amount of them in there. We've seen a few young of the year walleyes this year so far in our electrofishing, but the jury's kind of still out on those. Typically when we have these large year classes, and these aren't just large year classes, these are like record year classes of perch, walleye, and tullibee from last year that we've talked about a lot, which is good. But oftentimes we see kind of an average or weaker year class following those large year classes. It's called year class suppression, and it's been observed in many fisheries in Minnesota and across the country. But they're just kind of limited in resources after those big year classes go through the year before. And there's the predation factor too on those. But yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing so far. As we get into the gillnet survey, we'll be looking more at the adult walleye population and the adult perch population and things like that. But yeah, so far that's kind of what we're seeing.
That's very cool. Greg, thank you so much for giving me the tour back there, being able to talk to the guys, kind of looking through some of those forage nets, being able to see, Eric and the guys crunching numbers. It's neat. It gets me fired up for fall. This weather has me super fired up for fall. To be able to leap right into fall like we did, it's exciting. So I appreciate you taking the time and explaining to our listeners some of the jobs that you guys have going on as fisheries biologists. You're going to want to stay tuned to the podcast. Our last segment, we're going to wrap up with a few more things fall, and then we're going to get into some details where I'm going to be next week when I venture up to Cook County and do some fishing in the very northeastern part of the state. I can't be more excited. Stay tuned. We got more dialed in angling coming your way.
Man Trap Lodge, a Park Rapids resort on beautiful Big Man Trap Lake. Features 16 decked-out private cabins with air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and a rare Northwood swimming pool. Cabins are available with 1 to 5 bedroom units to select from. Whether you're looking for a fishing trip, a family vacation, or a family reunion, Man Trap Lodge is the Park Rapids resort for you. Rent one of our fishing boats for a great day of fishing or a pontoon to cruise around the lake and relax. Man Trap Lodge is a truly magical Minnesota vacation spot that's fun for the whole family. Don't miss your chance to book your late summer or fall trip at Man Trap Lodge for some fantastic fishing. Check us out at mantraplodge.com.
Runnings Home, Farm, and Outdoor Stores are celebrating 78 years, serving 90 local communities across the Upper Midwest, the Northeast, and America's Heartland. Runnings has everything you and your family need for your home, on the farm, and in the outdoors. Lawn and garden, hardware, farm and ranch supplies, sporting goods, housewares, snacks, and everything for your pets. Go to runnings.com to find one of the 90 locations near you or shop online anytime at runnings.com. Runnings, your home, farm, and outdoor store.
Watertown, South Dakota is your hub for year-round fishing in the heart of the Glacial Lakes region. With Lakes Kempeska and Pelican right in town and dozens more just a short drive away, you'll find non-stop action for walleye, perch, and pike, just to name a few. When you're off the water, explore the Terry Redlin Art Center, Bramble Park Zoo, and many other great museums. Plus, award-winning pizza and family-friendly fun around every corner. Easy to reach, hard to leave. Plan your next cast at visitwatertownsd.com. So much Watertown, so little time.
Okay, I'm going to close out this segment of the podcast by talking a few things that you can do as anglers or fish that you can target, especially this time of year, because like I said in the podcast earlier, we're not quite into fall patterns, even though this light switch where these temps have dropped and surface temps have really fallen, things aren't quite all fall yet. And so here's a couple bites you can get on in the next few weeks. If you're heading up to your cabin or you want to close down a few things, or you just want to venture out into some local lakes. I know for sure pan fishing, because I've done a lot of it over the last few weeks, the panfish are starting to transition in a lot of lakes to the edges of the wintering basin. They're moving off the edge of the weed lines. I'm talking big bluegills, schools of gills, schools of crappies. They're starting to slide out a little bit. Like I said, some of my favorite ways to target those fish this time of year is throwing jig wraps into them. You can vertical jig wraps. You can cast them. You can fish with forward-facing sonar. You can also, jig right below your transducer, like you're ice fishing, and have really good success. Another thing is just to trolling, spinners, or even just light jigs with plastics and throwing them out behind the boat, letting them fall, and then just slowly working them back. And then even just casting plastics. I love just casting plastics, even if it's blind casting this time of year. Those fish are loaded up along the edges. And when you're casting baits like jigging wraps or small plastics and jigs, you're going to catch everything, right? You're going to catch panfish, you're going to catch bass, you're going to catch pike, you're going to catch walleyes. Everything's starting to slide out. Things are starting to transition, and you're going to have really good success on a lot of small lakes or any lake where there's good standing cabbage weeds, for example. But getting off the edge of that cabbage weed, those fish are going to start pulling out. Another bite that I've always looked forward to this time of year, and that's perch fishing. Jumbo perch fishing in September is one of my favorite months to target jumbo perch, either in the shallows, along the weed lines, throwing jigs and minnows, jigs and plastics. A a lot of perch on a lot of small lakes. They feed on a ton of crayfish, so don't be afraid to use small tube jigs, jigging wraps, that sort of thing. If there's no vegetation, I love jigging wraps. Sort of those perch pattern colors, those dark browns, that sort of thing. If there is some sand grass and weeds that the perch are relating to, don't be afraid to throw a small tube jig, a red tube with a 16th ounce jig into that sand grass. They love it. You don't even need live bait. And if you are going to use live bait, my go-to for sure are just fatheads, something that's cheap. You can put a fathead on, you can put it on a jig head, pitch it out there, and these jumbo perch are starting to slide back in the shallows. A lot of lakes like Mille Lacs, they go out in the deep water all summer long, and then all of a sudden they show up in shallow waters. You can catch them in the weeds. You can catch them on the edge of the weed lines. Certain rock piles that have vegetation or eelgrass, you'll find those big jumbo perch showing up this time of year. Even little depressions between rock reefs, that sand will hold those fish. Those are great areas to throw jig wraps and catch them, not just on Mille Lacs, but Lake Winnebagosh, Leech Lake. They move super shallow. Cass Lake. There's just a pile of lakes in Minnesota where you can catch jumbo perch this time of year and have a lot of fun doing it. I remember as a kid going with my dad to Winnie, and it was always in September. We'd catch a ton of perch. We'd catch some walleyes mixed in. Ended up being an awesome experience. And then we'd come back and we'd fry fish and watch football. That's what fall is all about to me. I am super excited that this switch has been flipped from summer to fall. The quicker we can get to these fall bites, the better I am. I love fall season. It's by far my favorite time of year. I love to hunt. I love to fish. And that's why I love fall. Next week, like I said earlier in the podcast, I'm going to be up at Cook County. You look at northeastern Minnesota, sort of the arrowhead of Minnesota. It's a great time of year to be up there in the fall. I've waited all summer long to get up to Cook County and get out fishing. I'm going to meet up with my buddy Chad up there. I'm also going to interview a few other guides and outfitters, people that rent out canoes, that are familiar with the area, that have spent their entire life up there, even some guides that know the area well. I'm excited to get up there and fish. It's truly one of those locations that I love going to. I have my whole life. It's special, not just in Minnesota, but in the planet. It is just a unique destination. You have lots of inshore lakes. You have the boundary waters right there. Right in Cook County, you have some of the best fishing out on Lake Superior. I'm also going to try to get out to Lake Superior when I'm up there. So I'll have a full podcast based on that corner of Minnesota and that corner of the planet next week. So you're going to want to tune into that. Thanks for tuning in each and every week to the podcast. And lastly, I just want to close it out and give a farewell to my friend Randy Havel from StrikeMaster Augers. He was a true mentor, a true friend to me, and he'll definitely be missed. Rest in peace, my friend. Randy Havel, thanks for being such a good friend. I've had a lot of great friends and mentors and people in the industry and people that have guided me throughout my life, including my parents, my wife. So I'm very grateful for that I get to do what I love doing each and every day, and that's go out and go fishing. So good luck to everybody. Until next week, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.